I grew up in that house, and we had a lot of experiences. Again, meeting Martin Luther King and others, those are experiences not everybody gets. One thing I realized is that I think it's true that young children have a very good sense of right and wrong. They see when something is unfair or unjust. They understand that. Remember Martin Luther King, I think I was 5 or 6 when we met him. We grew up in an all-white suburb of Chicago. Our Latino foster brother and sister were the only non-whites in the school system, and one year we had some foreign students from Africa, the only blacks in the school system. And I remember the day after the day Martin Luther King was killed, my brother said, one of his classmates said, they finally got that nigger. And a kid, I mean, this is 5, 6 years after that, and a kid sees that and thinks, you know, this was a guy who put us up in a tree. He played with us. At a conference where adults don't all pay attention to the kids of the faculty, he played with us. And then you see how others in society think that he doesn't have a right to live. So you see black and white, right and wrong very clearly. And of course there are subtleties and shades of gray, but you don't like it that way. You understand something about that. And social justice, I figured as a kid, Dad marched at Selma, we were engaged in all this. I remember a good number of years we weren't allowed to answer the phone because of crank phone calls. Back then, no caller ID, no answering machines. We weren't allowed to answer the phone call because of some angry calls we'd get. But I thought, you know, when you look at who's in the civil rights marches down in the South, all the people from up north who come down there, rabbis and priests and ministers and nuns, it was people of faith. I thought at the time maybe I wanted to go into some religious vocation because that's the way you seek change. Later on, I kind of came to realize they're speaking out. They're providing the prophetic voice because society's doing the wrong thing. And so over the course of school and college and everything else, kind of realized that maybe somehow or another we have to change the political system in order to get to social justice. So I understood that all along. That was easy for me to figure out. I have wondered and watched when Glenn Beck and others are trying to distort things, how much of American society has people talking about, well, you know, because of the Bible may talk about being concerned about hungry kids, but that's not the role of government to do that. What they want us to do is, me as an individual will choose to do something about it. I thought that's a lot of stuff that my Bible never said. It doesn't say, well, we're supposed to be concerned about hungry kids, but that means I should give them this. But government, collectively, we're supposed to do nothing about it. I kind of wonder when you talk about social justice as if it's, I can give you something of charitable efforts, that somehow or another that maybe means that's enough. What about worker safety? How do we charitably give somebody a safer workplace? Their employer might have something to do about it, and maybe somebody has to push their employer to do it, or to pay somebody a decent wage, because I don't think, I mean, you look at what our charitable system is. We have a thing, I was at a forum a few months ago, a gubernatorial forum put on by the Second Harvest, the food bank system. And one of the things I had to ask, because I've been strongly supportive of that, I think we have to do that. There are people desperately needing it. But why do we need a second set of free grocery stores for people? Because they can't afford to go to the regular ones. Maybe we should do something about the economic system that causes people to not be able to afford to go to the grocery store. When working people can't, we got to look at that. So I've always thought when some people, they say, oh, the progressives or the Democrats think government's got to do all this, and conservatives say the individual's got to do all this. Most of the religious texts that talk about social justice don't say it's the responsibility of an individual or a government. They say it's our responsibility, and it doesn't matter. If you try one and it doesn't solve the problem, you better do the other one. If you do that and it doesn't solve it, maybe you got to do both and instead of either or. But social justice is something that I think most of us recognize that we as a society are supposed to care about. It is, Dad mentioned, something people of faith tend to have a very particular interest in, because almost any faith you can find has a call to do that. The prophets in any religion are talking about being concerned for others. But even people without any faith background understand the importance of being fair and about caring for people. So we want to care for people. We want to do something about it. What's become interesting and scary, I think, and sad, I should say, may be the better term, for the way we deal with these things in modern society is the fact that we love to talk about it, but sometimes acting on it is a different thing. And I'll give a couple of examples quickly. A couple of years ago, I was co-chairing a legislative commission on poverty. It was a very descriptive name. You didn't need a description to go along a paragraph to tell what the responsibility was because the commission's name said it. Minnesota Legislative Commission on Ending Poverty in Minnesota by 2020. That summarized it. We were working on some recommendations partway through it, and I, at one point, raised the message to some of the other commission members that we were getting a little bit timid in what we were talking about. And I told them the name of the commission, and I wouldn't have chosen to serve as chair of this commission if it had a name in the direction we seem to be heading, namely Minnesota Legislative Commission on Making Poverty a Little Less Miserable for Some of the People in It by 2020. And I think everyone, the Democrats and Republicans, it was a bipartisan, I think everyone would say, yeah, that's kind of, why would you waste your time on that? But that's the way the political system sometimes seems to go. You listen to people talk about universal health care. I don't know any Democrats here or in Washington who don't want universal health care. But when we get to the policy, we sort of separate away from it. I can go more to this later in the questions, but you have, even if the entire federal proposal that the president initially proposed with a robust public option, the House committee said it would cover 94% of the people. And that's better than the 81% we're covering now. It's even better than the 91% we have in Minnesota. But 94% and universal, there's not an equal sign between those. So we talk and talk about how we want to do this. And I like to suggest that as we look at these things, we ought to look back in history. Ending poverty by 2020, well, that's a good idea. Yeah, let's talk about it, but we don't really want to do it because, well, we couldn't do it. Some people even quoted the Bible. The poor you will always have with you, meaning we couldn't possibly do anything about it. The Bible gives us an excuse, I guess. But we talk about it as if, well, we can't really get there. It's not going to happen. I sometimes suggest if the progressive movement of today was in charge of the abolition campaign 150 years ago, we'd still have slavery, but we'd have limited the slaves to working 40-hour work weeks. And we'd be so proud of the progress we'd made, we forget we still have slavery. We covered more people. I mean, the bill in Washington is going to do amazing things. It's going to cover 2/3 of the people who are uninsured. It'll give them some coverage. It won't cover dental, won't do this, and insurance is not health care, and so on. But what about those who don't have health care yet? And so I think we have to recognize when we talk about social justice, most people, I know you get some people in the fringe who say, oh, we shouldn't do that. That's not the role of government. We should never do that. But most people, when Hubert Humphrey said, we're good people here in Minnesota, we care about our seniors. We're going to take care of them. We're going to fund the nursing homes. People say, we are good people. We care about our neighbors. We're going to do it. And when you appeal to the good in people, I think the people want to respond. And I think our society has to. But the one thing I'll leave off for when we start the conversation is the idea that sometimes we get to the point where we really don't think we're ever going to get there. We don't ever try to get there. And I'm not saying we're going to have a utopian society, because we're not. But the idea that we could cover everybody for health care, Slovenia does it. 37 other countries do. It's not like it's impossible. So social justice is something we ought to be talking about, we ought to be fighting for. Thank you.